Like if Elon's goal is like massive amounts of engagement on top of engagement on top of engagement, this is doing a great job of that.
Right, because it's also a version of like you know how we talk about like dunking, quote retweets.
Right. It's like the official dunk.
It's the official dunk. Your take is actually awful based on like these resources.
Provably, credibly neutral, awful. Yeah.
So that's so incredibly neutral. Just engagement like 101, right?
Welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. We've got the NAI boys here today. Jack Butcher, Trung Phan, Bilal Zaidi. We're going to go straight to meme of the week. Trung, tee it up, mate.
This is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, boys. And it just speaks to why, you know, when people talk about, oh, what's going on Twitter/X? This can only happen on Twitter/X, okay? It involves a celebrity and the website Cameo. You guys know Cameo, where you ask a celebrity to shout out?
We had a Cameo for NI, remember that? Back in the day.
So this is the, So here's a tweet. It's from @JerseyPhysicist. He goes, and it just says, this site is unreal. And he puts 4 frames of an interaction that he found. So I'll just give you guys, I'm just going to show you the first frame and the last frame, and I'll fill you out in the middle. So the first frame is this, people. So for the listeners, I'll describe what's happening. So basically on Twitter, people realize that if you've ever seen the show Breaking Bad, there's these Mexican hitmen twins. I think they're Mexican, but the whole point is that they're twins. They're twins in real life. One's name is Luis Mancado, and another's name is Daniel Mancado. So somebody realized that on Cameo, Daniel charges $500 for a cameo, and his twin brother charges $99. So somebody posts this. This goes super viral. People are like, what's going on? How come these twins are charging such different rates? So one user goes, Luis has made $45,320. This is the guy that's charging less, $99. And Daniel, the guy that charges $500, has made $15,000. And this guy writes, just goes to show that the hard grinder with the low prices can make more money than the guy that overcharges. So that's funny, right? Somebody replies, I think you're wrong here. I think Daniel and Luis are in this together. I think people are seeing the twins, realizing that one's 500 and one's 99, so they all go to the guy that's lower.
Oh, that's price, incredible. Right? That's so good.
We're not done yet. See, that is like right now, that's a 5 out of 10.
That's one dude.
That's pretty funny.
Here. You're seeing that, you're like, wow, that's pretty funny. I wonder if it's true. I wonder if they're using this price anchoring effect, showing a high price and pushing everybody low price. Frickin' Daniel Mancado replies to this thread. Remember, we're talking about the show Breaking Bad here. And Breaking Bad has some of the greatest memes in the history of the internet. I'm about to show you guys what Daniel Mancado replies with. So remember, people on the internet have basically said, we think these guys are running a scam. Look what Daniel Mancado posts. Daniel Mancado posts an image of Walter Wright saying, you got me.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God, dude. This thing has like 300,000 internet interactions. Just incredible. Like the greatest interaction ever. This guy comes in, is like, you got me. Anyways.
Love that they're just colluding. That is incredible. They're just honest. They got all the bases covered there. Dude, they know what they're doing.
And they can do each other's job, right?
Yeah, they can
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And split the funds.
No one even knows.
Dude, hilarious. So the TLDR is internet's undefeated. Twitter X is irreplaceable. And that's one of the greatest lessons in price anchoring I've ever seen.
Go.
Anyway.
All right.
Love it.
Smashing it, mate. Well, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to do a deep edge of the internet segment to take it back for the old school listeners. We're going to be talking about Friend.tech. If you guys remember that, I think episode 1, we talked about BitClout, right? I think it was one of the first few episodes.
Way back. Yeah.
So it's 2023 version of that. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. Brian Armstrong, founder and CEO of Coinbase, and has been talking a little bit about getting around the App Store and the reasons why you should be adding certain apps to the home screen. And then there's an NFT update that Jack wanted to talk about, what's going on in OpenSea land. And then Tron's going to be breaking down the ARM IPO. It might be the biggest IPO of the year, it looks like. So we're going to be talking about that. Vitalik on community notes. And at the end, we've got a nice philosophical question about the malleability of social reality to look forward to.
Philosophical question that Jack found from a Twitter shit post.
Incredible.
Again, Twitter X undefeated people.
It's the source. It's the fire hose.
The fountain of memes.
Yeah, fountain of memes, exactly. So, Jack, over to you, mate. What is going on Friend.tech side? You're the one who flagged it for us in our group chat. Yeah, I mean, I read a little bit about it before, but I'll just let you explain what it is.
Wait, hold on, Jack. Before you jump in, I have to make a comment. Jack's wearing a Costco wholesale hat.
Oh yeah, shit! I completely forgot to talk about that.
And I'm wearing a Puma gym shirt. I don't know if people have realized how hard the Puma gym gear is at Costco right now.
Oh, incredible!
I picked up 5 of these, bro. Every colorway.
Cold brew as well. Jack's also got a Ford t-shirt on, by the way. He's decked out today.
Yeah. Merchant. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I was going to say, for people who couldn't zoom in on the hat, it's a red cap. You're wearing it. So we had to just clarify Costco hat over here.
This is a Costco veteran's hat. This has been purchased from a ex-Costco employee on eBay.
Bro, that is not, you're not finding that on the rack.
It's a collectible, my friend. Yeah.
Where'd you get that, Jack? Someone got it for you.
Celia bought it for me.
Celia got it for you.
Yeah, off eBay, yeah.
Oh, incredible. Was this for your birthday? Or was this just a
couple years ago?
Gift?
I don't know if it was a birthday. It's just showed up, I think.
Mate, that is wifey Incredible. There. Look at that. Indeed. Finding the merch, indeed. All right, cool. So Friend.tech, what is it, Jack? We talked about BitClout back in the day. I don't know if you've used it much, but what is Friend.tech?
So I haven't used it, but let me give a little bit of my understanding of it. So little context setting. Coinbase shipped an L2 on Ethereum 2 months ago now, maybe. It's called Base. And the layman explanation of that is basically a cheaper blockchain that is at one layer abstracted from Ethereum, right? So if a transaction costs you $10 on Ethereum, it costs you 25 cents, 50 cents on Base, depending on the volume of traffic on the network at any given time. So what that does is makes it more possible or inviting for people who want to develop apps that potentially have more use cases or can onboard more people because it doesn't cost $10, $20 every time you interact with the chain, right? So one of the use cases that has emerged is this app called Friend.tech, which the analogy that is being used is BitClout because there is this parallel between a access to people based on owning like fractional shares in inverted commas of each account. They've since renamed shares to keys, and this idea of buying access to a private chat room with somebody. So it takes the Twitter social graph. So you sign up with your Twitter account and a wallet. I think they've done, from what I've heard, they've done a great job of like building an interface to onboard people more quickly than, 2-3 years ago. We're talking about BitClout, which had, I don't even remember what the BitClout token, what chain that ran on, or whether it was his own thing or whatever. This is like native to Ethereum. So there are people in a position to start using it straight away. And over the last week or so, it's just had this parabolic growth, probably $100 million of transaction volume. They have like a fee structure where buying and selling these keys generates fees for the accounts. So just by, there you go. What does this say? Yeah, 1.7 million transaction. The protocol's earned 2,000 ETH. So what's that? $4 million thereabouts.
How many users is this though? How many users?
94,000 users. And you can't necessarily attribute that to individuals, right? Because there are multiple addresses people are using, there are bots, there are things being automated. So I have no idea what the actual use is, but just exploded over the last week or so. FaZe Banks, the gaming streaming fella. There you go. He's 8th on there. So a lot of these guys on the top of the list here. Kobe's up there.
Legend,
Racer, I think, is on the founding team of the product. And these other top 10, 20 are all big crypto Twitter personalities.
People buying essentially shares, they called it, but now it's called keys, you said.
Yeah.
On for Kobe's, so his price is basically going up and down. It says latest ETH price 2.3. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
That's the price to enter the private room, from my understanding, with Kobe in there reading and replying to comments. So it's like a OnlyFans on a bonding curve. I think there's been like a
Wait, did
only
you come
fans
up with
on
that?
a bonding curve.
No. I've seen that thrown around.
So is this a competitor to Twitter, or is it a competitor to OnlyFans? I guess Twitter is turning into OnlyFans. So.
I mean, neither. I don't think. Like, I think people have been. I don't know exactly where the difference between the two, like, where the founding team sees the difference between the two, right? Whereas OnlyFans is just like subscription model where you're paying a fixed amount for period of months, versus this having this dynamic pricing model, and the account earns based on the volume of transaction in and out of their private room, right? There's a fee going to the account for every time a key is bought and sold. So, but the primary function is this access to people. So
have you been in a private room?
No, I haven't used I just do not have the mental capacity for another platform. I will not be participating.
So this actually brought me to questions like, what are your thoughts? Is this thing, because I saw the chart that Bilal showed, the transaction volume that already did it. Is this one and done again? Is this another one that'll just be gone?
I haven't used it, so it wouldn't be fair for me to say whether or not, how long people will stick around with it. It's the thing I think to solve is the cost of entry. If the top end content ends up costing $5-6 grand a piece, then that's a small number of people that can access that, right?
Jack, I think just to clarify, one thought from my side was
Paradigm just invested in it too. Sorry to interrupt
no, that's
you.
right. No, okay, that's good to know. Yeah, but I was gonna say, because when BitClout came, well, I think it was like 2 years ago plus, right? And it was, the idea was, you're kind of essentially buying shares or something in a personality. So here on the TechCrunch article, it says, allows users to tokenize their likeness by selling shares of themselves to their followers, who then become shareholders and can message the users directly. I know you said they're no longer shareholders, they're like key holders or something like that. But we all understand bag holders, exactly. But the key point there is it can message the users directly, which is what you said. That's kind of what you're selling in air quotes, which is access to that person. Versus before, BitClout to me felt very much like, oh, you're buying a stake in this person's name, and like this, their name is going to be traded, and it's going up and down based on just supply and demand, essentially. This one is probably got a similar dynamic in terms of dynamic pricing, I'm assuming, but they're trying to say it's about messaging the users directly. So there's like a room you said they can go into or whatever. So I guess the question is, long term, do people actually care enough to be paying for that access to those people? Or is it, again, just a speculation thing and they're paying for it because they think the money that's going to go up in the future? And my hunch is it's probably the latter, but I guess we'll see.
We'll find out.
Well, you did describe there is that difference, right, Bilal? I think that was a very illustrative difference you made there. It's like BitClout was clearly just number go up, right? There does seem to be some access here. I will say about the BitClout thing, in hindsight, it's just absurd, right? The whole thing. I think I love your guys' thoughts on this because it's a more philosophical question. When you start assigning value to social capital, right, which is what's happening here. Similarly, what's happening with creator payouts on Twitter and even them adding like impressions and bookmarks. They're assigning more numbers to what social capital is, right? So Eugene Wei, who we've spoken about here in the past, has written extensively on social networks. He's got an incredible 3-part series on TikTok. Recently wrote about how Twitter has changed under Elon. But he said something on the recently that I heard on a podcast. I believe it was with Ben Thompson, who has get mentioned once a month here. He said basically something to the effect of turning social capital, putting a number on it, is actually not a great thing. You want social capital to kind of be fuzzy. Like that's how it functions, right?
That's interesting because you said the number, but I think it's more money because there's always been a number with a follow account and likes and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's
but you want
when
one
you put
layer
of
abstraction between your name and a price.
Yeah. When the price is actually there, it makes it a less fuzzy, right? Because you guys know the drill with people that aren't quote unquote the richest people you know, but just know everyone. They wield a different type of power, right? And it's that fuzzy social capital. I've been thinking about that with when I saw Friend.tech, I'm like, man, I think BitClout was actually, I think assigning a number to somebody is just not, I think that original thesis of a NASDAQ for people, I actually don't think it's good. I think having that layer of abstraction and mystery for social capital is what makes it so powerful.
Yeah.
It's a different type of mental fortitude to endure that over a long period of time too. Like the stock price of a Fortune 500 business, like you get paid $10 million a year as a CEO to have your entire reputation staked on a single number, right? And that the compensation is consummate with how much pressure comes with that versus having that and not getting access to the same upside. Does that make sense? Like the mental fortitude or the change in mentality, like it's just, as you say, like as a social norm, we're a ways away from that. But with the X stuff happening, like it is the Overton window on attention and money is widening, right?
I think, yeah, definitely. And I think, Trung, what you mentioned there earlier is important to kind of call out as well, because I think we used to cover a lot of the crypto stuff when it was in the hype cycle in the beginning of the pod. Like every week we would have a new thing, right? And I think the conclusion to a lot of those discussions were, is there utility here really, or is it hype? What's driving this? Is there actually a real use case, which is kind of what I would always ask. And so I think we're like having some time away from that now and like looking at this again as another wave of like utility. Someone's actually trying to create something with utility. It reminds me a little bit of like the Step-In app. Remember we talked about that, and I used it for a while, lost a little bit of money on that. It was one of those things where going in it's going to be stupid, but I was like, oh, I'll charge it to the game so I can do my research here. But it was one of those things where, again, you're buying it because you want to earn some money from walking / the price of the NFT going up or whatever. And there happens to be an idea of, oh, well, you can go and walk and it's good for you to go for a walk and you might make some money at the same time. But if you don't, well, at least you had a walk anyway. You know what I mean? So it was this kind of distraction around the core reason that someone was buying that in most cases was because they're like, oh, I can buy this for 1 and sell it for 3. And so my opinion, again, was most of this stuff, by default, I assume it is that until proven otherwise. And for a long time, we've been looking for real utility in crypto. So it'd be interesting to see. I do think when we talked about BitClout originally, there was the positive side of it was we're all users of social media and we're the product. We're the ones getting monetized. We're not making any money from using Instagram, Twitter, etc. until very recently. I mean, obviously Twitter now, there are these payouts. Instagram have just introduced them for Reels. YouTube's obviously got it as well. But that is, I think, a positive direction where the users do make some money if they provide utility or they have the option to opt into it. So I think we are moving to that either way. And the question is, does it actually have to be on crypto rails? Does crypto actually allow new use cases that didn't exist otherwise? And I saw actually people talking about the creator payouts on Twitter, that they did that very quickly and they were able to do that again without Twitter rails. Like they've literally, without crypto rails, sorry, they're just using Stripe essentially, right? And so it is interesting. I'm not against the idea of it. I think it's kind of a cool idea. If people know going in what they're signing up for, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, similar to Jack, I haven't signed up and played around with it yet. Anything else on that? Go on, Tron.
No, I was just saying we should probably touch on the other related stuff that Jack mentioned.
Yeah. So similarly, Brian Armstrong, Jack, you mentioned this just before the pod started. You said he tweeted out something around add to home screen.
Well, that's how this thing works. So the way they built this Friend.tech app is it's a progressive web app, and you have to sign up on your phone. And there's like a gated, from what I understand, the process to sign up is gated by adding the app in inverted commas to your home screen via there's that shortcut in Safari where you can add a website as an app icon. Yeah. So that obviously skirts around the economic requirements of the App Store, where any transaction going through something that is technically an app that comes through the App Store, they want their 30% on the in-app items and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the landing page here. It says visit Friend.tech on a phone to install the app. It doesn't say visit App Store.
I'm sure Tim Cook is looking at that positively. I'm sure he's like, this is a smart move.
It's a bizarre thing, because Brian Armstrong tweeted out a direct quote tweet of like, whoever is doing this at Apple, we're on your side. We love you, right? Which it seems like a bizarre way to draw attention to it, but at the same time, I guess getting out ahead of it is probably a reasonable way to approach it too.
Who tweeted that out? You said
Brian Armstrong. I'll find the tweet.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. That's
so
interesting.
Just to clarify, Brian Armstrong, co-founder and CEO of Coinbase
He tweeted, listeners. Shout out to the mobile Safari team at Apple for this brave act of civil disobedience. Know that you have friends on the outside who will protect you.
Oh, you know what? Okay, let me
Breaking Bad too, bro.
Yeah, sounds like the twins. Sounds like Daniel Mancada. Is there any more? Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Okay, let me give a little background on what's going on here. Before Jack talks about specifically crypto and app stores, I'm going to talk about App Store in general. So we've talked about in the past, App Store, I believe, takes 15% it's 30% was originally the number, but they've been under a lot of a regulatory pressure for what people think is a usurious rip or take. So the initial iPhone idea was, we will only allow apps on the phone that go through the App Store, because we don't want sketchy, like, remember how Microsoft used to have like a Microsoft PC, would there be like viruses every day? Like that was the thesis behind Apple, right? Like Steve Jobs was like, no, we're controlling the experience 100%.
Incredible in hindsight, just like how that is a chapter of history where, man, your Windows PC, I don't know what the experience is like now, but back in the day it was insane.
Do you remember, like, once a month you'd have to run like the antivirus scan,
and you'd get that worm.exe in there somewhere.
Oh, by the way, half your computer is like a virus.
You'll be like, I thought I was downloading soldierboy.mp3, but it was actually soldierboy.exe, and it was just some ridiculous virus.
Dude, so like the Apple thesis when they did the App Store, I mean, it made a lot of sense, right? 2008, you have to remember, like these mobile apps, totally new idea, and the model for Apple has always been tightly control the hardware and software. So the App Store has also continued that model, and I think the transaction within the App Store has reached $1 trillion lifetime, like something insane, right? Like it's just like we talk about this all the time. There's over 2 billion iPhones have been sold. Every one of them has an app in it. Over 1 billion installed iPhones now. It's the gateway to the internet for the richest people in the world. Like that's the reality, right? More people own Android phones.
Great quote, by the way. Great quote there, Tron. You got
there you go, right? But the richest sliver of society, of society all use iPhone, right? I mean, that's the joke. Like iPhone is 15% of all smartphones, but I think like 100% of all profits, right? Like something insane. So the App Store stuff, more recently, last 2-3 years, people are realizing, like this 30% tax, like, which is the fee that developers pay to Apple when they transact through the app. it's quite onerous, but Apple's position has always been like, no, well, like we make sure it's secure. And then what Jack's referring to actually is quite interesting. So there's something called anti-steering. So what that means is if you have the Amazon Kindle app, and I'm sure a lot of listeners remember this, on the iPhone, you couldn't buy a book on Amazon it was the most annoying thing in the world. You could not buy directly on the Amazon Kindle app in the App Store because Amazon didn't want to give Apple 30% of that transaction, right? So for a long time, Apple wouldn't even let developers, and I'm just using Kindle because a lot of people have it, but there's like, think about all the thousands of apps in there. You can even send an email to your users being like, oh, by the way, like you can purchase like outside of the App Store. So
they would dump you off the.
Yeah, like they wouldn't even let you do that. It's like you're not even allowed to do that. So that is part of the regulators are like, well, that's the regulators have determined that's sketchy. Like you can't not do that. That's truly anti-consumer
type situation. Yeah.
It's like you can't even tell people that they have other options. So that's changed. The 30. So now I think they're a little bit more lenient. If you make $1 million, up to $1 million, it's only 15%. Or and subscriptions, it's 30% year one and the 50% in following years. So the Barely AI app does not have to worry about the 30% tax.
There you go. Not yet, Tron. Not yet.
Baby.
So like, I made a couple jokes about bitching about the 30% tax, and then people have just been messaging me. He's like, dude, I don't think you're hitting it. Just let you know that I don't think you're hitting the cutoff here.
But you're right, Tron. I think
30% is really mind-bending when you think
about
feels
energy.
closer to a processing
Well, it's also
fee.
crazy, right? Like, because the history of the 30% tax goes back to the mid 80s. Like when you start thinking about the path dependence. So here it was. This is the history of the tax. In the mid 80s, Nintendo was allowing third-party developers to make games on their platform. Very rare. But some of them that did it, they're like, okay, well, we're going to charge you 15% just to be on our platform. Nintendo, fair enough. Good distribution. But we're also going to charge you 15% to manufacture the cartridge for you. Fair enough. So half
seems
that,
super fair. Yeah.
You're going to manufacture for us, but that has stayed for the past 40 years.
Well, I think the pro Apple argument is like how many billions of dollars have they invested to build the platform, and they're like recouping that 30 years later.
A million times over.
Right. But that's the bounty.
You're right. Like how many of those businesses would exist without the App Store in the first place is the argument too.
And it's not, and it's almost like you're comparing it in an interesting, I don't know, like I think about building a team or a business around an iPhone native game, for example, and the 30% like wouldn't even really come into your calculations, right? You would, well, it would, but
no, you're factoring like that in though. You're factoring
You're building with that, like you're paying the 30% for access to the platform, and obviously the nuance of that is really hard to message to small teams, but at the same time, like, imagine if Shopify charged you 30%. And this is the argument for crypto and the open internet and all of these things, which I think will like neatly introduce us to our next topic, community notes and Vitalik's point on that. But the chaos and the wrangling of all like decentralized entities to come to consensus on something is much harder than, the singular visionary that's like, we're going to build it this way and I am not going to budge on it whatsoever. And if you execute perfectly on that vision for 30 years, then you're, the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit, and now they're eating the fruit.
Well, Jack, hold on a second, Bilal. Let me tie something up for Jack, because I did want to ask this specifically is, so we're talking about, that's the background on the App Store, right? But I did want to ask Jack specifically about crypto in the App Store, because Jack had mentioned some interesting stuff pre-chat. I don't know, Bilal, if that's where you're going with
I was just about to say the same, because it ties into the NFT OpenSea stuff with listing fees.
So let me finish this thing. I'll pass it on to you to ask him about that. So what I was going to say was this specifically was, now going back to Brian Armstrong, that tweet that Bilal had called Mafia-esque, like, oh, thank you for the bravery. I think that I think is part of this regulatory thing. Apple is not quite saying they got to loosen it up a bit, right? So they're letting you drag like that website to the home screen, so it's kind of like an app. There's still friction. They're not letting you download it directly.
Similar to an app, to be honest, because a lot of them nowadays are essentially web apps in an app form.
You can design that, right?
And if you get one of those take off with decent network effect, it really does like potentially really disrupt this stuff, especially with what you can build in a browser. And the reason these guys use Safari, like it is only limited to Safari too, because Chrome doesn't have that functionality because it's not as deeply integrated with iOS, right? So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
The Apple native browser allows you to do that. And then I don't know what the flow is here, but even Apple Pay would kind of get you around that, right? Like if you go to Amazon.com on your phone, you could pay with Apple Pay. Apple's not taking a cut of that. So like it does start to get into the minutia or the nuance of like what is a product, what are you buying versus what is like an in-app item. And that's where this NFT discussion gets complicated. OpenSea shipped an app where you can only browse. You can't buy or sell because there would be a 30% tax on buying items, I'm assuming. And if it's a peer-to-peer marketplace, that just doesn't work, right? Imagine if we just talked about it before we started recording, if eBay must have an app, surely, but maybe it's just I don't know, maybe they don't. But if you said to eBay, we're going to take 30% of every transaction that goes through the app, that completely invalidates the business model, right?
Yes, 100%. 100%. So this is what you're saying now. So Bilal mentioned is like, so did you already address the OpenSea removing the royalties or?
No. This is the last couple of weeks, NFT royalties, basically, I think they're honoring some of them for a month or so, and then it's going to zero. So really at the beginning of this whole NFT thing, there was like, whoever created that piece in the first place could set the royalty percentage, and when OpenSea was the only player, they could enforce it, right? But the reality of this world is that these are permissionless things that are deployed on transparent networks, so anybody can build a front end and get around that royalty that was very similar to the App Store, enforced through OpenSea's front end, basically, and some contracts that they shipped. They then built this thing last year called the operator filter, which helped. I may get some of the technicalities wrong here, but hopefully, generally speaking, I'm correct. They shipped this operator filter that allowed you to block other marketplaces. So if I want to ship a collection, I could say I want it traded exclusively on OpenSea, so I get some of those royalties on secondary sales. And for a while that worked, and then more and more marketplaces found ways to get around that. So all the volume moved off OpenSea to Blur, which we talked about a couple months ago. And then this week, they announced that a couple months ago, I don't know if we covered this, they said they're only going to enforce minimum royalties, so 0.5%, and that's in response to Blur doing that from the start. So they matched that. Now they're saying they're sunsetting this operator filter support. So they're not going to provide support for people blocking or blacklisting collections on other platforms. And 2 days after they announced that, so they basically said there will be no royalties enforced at this point forward. 2 days after they announced that, they said, we are going to charge 0.5% for listing. So they flipped completely on the creator royalty and then added a cost to participating even as a seller.
What's the net? Does that hurt? Oh, so does that hurt creators or hurt? So like, what is the net of all this? Who is benefiting? Who's getting hurt?
I mean, I think they are trying to, I don't know. I really don't understand the decision from.
It sounds like you, as a creator, like you're the NFT creator in your case, right? You would be getting hit there because you're no longer getting royalties.
For sure, that's
and you're
true.
Paying a listing fee. So it's gone from one side to the other. But I guess their argument might be, they need to find a model where they can make money, and they're now taking it from your side versus the other side, I guess.
So Yuga Labs, the guys that did Bored Ape Yacht Club, came out a couple of days after this and said, we're working on a way to block OpenSea. And they've done, I think their collections have paid OpenSea 100 mil in fees in the last couple of years. And that's probably like north of 50% of their trading volume comes from these guys. I don't know if it's that big, but it is a huge chunk. And they potentially have the network effect to build their own marketplaces, right? They have the pull and the established brand to maybe start their own thing and prevent OpenSea from cashing in on the like secondary activity of their collections. It's all kind of up in the air right now, but it has definitely, the entire narrative around royalties has changed in the last few weeks, where in my mind, this is just the progression of markets, right? People just find a way to make transactions cheaper. This also happened in traditional markets, however many years ago, with Robinhoods of the world, and they like exchanges that find a way to monetize by, payment for order flow to big institutions, and then they let retail execute for free. So yeah, I think there's it's like, weirdly, it's the maturity of it happening, but it's also a byproduct of that maturity is basically directly affecting the people that contributed for the first 2 years of this thing growing. And it remains to be seen whether or not OpenSea can even generate like revenue in a meaningful way from these changes, because there's only like, I don't know, 10,000 active wallets trading on OpenSea these days. Like it's really like, it is the all-time low volume. And you've got to imagine that most people are sort of really in tune with the culture of it. That's why this is different than even like big retailers changing their policy or the App Store changing their policy, because the people that are participating are like deeply involved or deeply paying attention to every decision. It's like people don't stop using Amazon when the policy, the fee policy changes slightly, and the network effect of it is so big, it doesn't really change anything. But in this case with OpenSea, it's like every announcement they make is like, there's not that many people left doing this stuff. So there's huge risk in that, obviously.
Yeah. So it's not a $12 billion company anymore, is what Bilal is trying to say.
Well, Jack, I was going to say I mean, I'm just looking at OpenSea right now. Your NFT, even today, is the third biggest collection on OpenSea at the moment, right?
What's
like Bored Ape, Mutant Ape, OpenPen. That's you, right? Number 3.
Yeah.
So, you've got another one which maybe has dropped down the ranks right now, but like you're one of the leading people in this space in terms of creating stuff that goes on their platform. So I think you have a really valid opinion to share. So I'm just curious to understand, like from your point of view, does it change the way you treat OpenSea versus the other platforms? For example, if you launch another NFT in the future collection, would you consider going only on the other platforms where they do allow the more creator-friendly things? Or or I guess the distribution of OpenSea is so large that you kind of need to be on there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had this conversation a few times, and I haven't really processed all of this. So I might not be speaking that clearly about it, but one point I made a few months ago is weirdly, the people that benefit most from royalties are the people that need it the least. And like, there's just this very weird relationship with it where I think the way it gets argued is, artists that don't have a ton of exposure or people that are creating digital objects that don't have massive network effects love the idea of getting paid in perpetuity as that stuff trades, on the secondary market. But it's like this chicken and egg thing where if you don't have that attention, there is no like volume on the secondary market. So it doesn't really make that much difference. And if you are in the position where you're earning royalties, you have this reputation that allows you to make new stuff. You get what I'm saying? Like your ability to mint new objects and charge for them is your these things are clashing into each other because there's this scarcity argument with NFTs, right? Everybody wants this to be the last thing you ever create because they want the supply to remain small. They want the supply of collectibles to be small. But at the same time, if you're like really native to this world, your only way to continue to monetize is to create new objects, right? Ship new product, basically. And the culture of it has to change where you have these staggered degrees of scarcity within the entirety of the ecosystem you're building, right? Like Ferrari sells Puma trainers for $50. They also sell an 812 Superfast for $600,000, right? The Ferrari brand is stamped on both of those things, but those objects have different relative value and utility and all that stuff. And I recognize that sounds insane when you talk about two different pictures on the internet, but there is relative value in the way things are made and assigned provenance and, you know, the relationship they have to other things. And
one is more rare than the other too in that case, right?
Right. And
and utility, obviously.
Yeah. So this idea of scarcity in my mind is actually killing this medium. Like the fact that people are afraid to make more stuff. Like if you're a digital artist, make digital art, mint digital art, sell digital art. That's what you should do. Like, and the hyper financialization of all this stuff has messed with people's brains in a way that, I don't know, the royalty debate really felt like the thing that got people outside of this world to get it, and it being destroyed is really messing with people, you know? Like I remember my Celia's uncle, that's the one thing that he clung on to. He's like, oh, so when it gets traded on the secondary market, you get a small fee for that. I was like, yeah. He's like, that's insane, right? Like he builds houses and he's like, well, if I got 1% every time somebody like moved in and out of a house I built, that'd be incredible. It's this, sorry to make a sailor reference, but it's like everybody's trying to get something for nothing, right? Everybody wants to work once and get paid infinitely. And the idea of that translating into a world like this felt super native, but because it's built on this permissionless infrastructure, the market always wins. The market always builds something that creates for the fastest transaction, the cheapest transaction, the blah, 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 the original intent or the original like attribution be damned. So man, it's all up in the air right now, but it fundamentally changes how and why people are going to interact with this stuff. And we're also seeing stuff like this base chain that Coinbase shipped. People are putting out collections on there for, you know, it's $1 to mint these things, $2 to mint these things. You can collect this stuff without this culture of, oh, we're only going to make 1,000 of these, and then our job is to try and inflate the value of these 1,000 things to infinity. Very different than what's happening today, where it's just making stuff, minting stuff, like establishing a portfolio of work as a digital artist on these cheaper chains. So the whole culture of it is kind of going through this insane, almost inversion of itself. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Very interesting, man. Yeah, good to get your perspective on that. Trung, any thoughts, mate, before we move on to Vitalik community notes?
I love just what you mentioned, Bilal, like Jack's ranking. Very valid
gotta
opinion
let him
here.
know, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
gotta let him know. These are valid
respect.
thoughts. I got the only thing I'd add is I'm trying to see if they're changing on the royalty actually makes more sense in reference to or in relation to App Store. I don't know how much of that is a motivation, but if the transactions are happening more, then that's more likely to happen within an app. Whereas if you're doing a listing fee, the listing fee is one time. So maybe they want people just to list off the app, and that's where the revenue comes from. It does seem like a way to basically prevent a rip. I think the reality and we talked about it before the chat. It's like, man, the bottleneck that of mainstream crypto adoption is like it's reality, right? People spend all their time on their phones. Like this is where they live with their internet. And if Tim Apple is deciding that he wants 30% of everything, like, well, Jack, you said it. What did you say? Is like the 30% just destroys crypto economics, right? It's like the entire point is like low friction.
Well, this idea of ownership, that's the idea that is the central to this point is you can charge a 30% fee on an ebook because the person doesn't own the ebook, right? The idea of charging 30% in a peer-to-peer transaction where, Trung, I'm selling you a copy of this ebook that I bought for $10 and I get $7 back, then you sell it and you get $5, and then it just, Apple just eats the margin on that till it goes to zero. It's just a completely fundamental shift philosophically in whether or not you can own digital things or you can transact in digital objects. And most of the world still does not believe that that should be a thing. And Apple, I mean, I can't even imagine how that court case played out. But the crypto being part of that discussion still feels like miles away. The other point I should have brought up on the OpenSea thing is the way they framed the 5% fee, the listing fee, was also for like more accurate market data. So if you're not charging anything to list, then people are just like doing massive high volume trading on this stuff. It's not introducing this friction of like maybe something that is more akin to an eBay, right? Where somebody is paying a fee to have distribution to broadcast this offer that they put out to the market versus, you know, these things acting like back and forth anonymous exchanges. So we'll see how it plays out. Certainly, yeah. I mean, smart people that built this thing, it's they got more information than anyone else, but it's fascinating. We'll see.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think that comparison to eBay is interesting because to me that feels like the closest comparison. Obviously, eBay transaction volume, I'm sure, is, I don't know the numbers. I'm assuming way larger, but also it's physical goods most of the time versus digital goods. So I have no idea of actual volume on that one. But yeah, that's interesting. All right, nice one, Jack, for that summary. Let's move on to the next topic here. We got Vitalik wrote a piece on community notes. Trung, I know you were reading this one. Do you want to share what he's talking about?
Yeah, so I'll just give the listeners a TLDR on what community notes is for people that aren't addicted to X and Twitter, which is probably a lot of this audience. Actually, I don't know. We should do a survey to see how many are addicted to X.
I'm pretty sure most are using it for sure, like primarily. But yeah, I don't know about addicted is a strong word. Yeah.
So community notes is like crowdsourced fact checking. You know, some people are comparing it to how like the Wikipedia has editors, but you'll see often contentious tweets, political, cultural, sports related, and then you'll know it's wrong. And community notes will just append something underneath the tweet. And the way it works right now is if you meet the following criteria on your X account, you've been active for 6 months, no recent rules violations, and a verified phone number, you can participate in community notes. What that means is you basically can assign, somebody writes a community note on a tweet, and you can assign one of 3 values: helpful, somewhat helpful, or not helpful at all. So that's what you can do. And then once you have done enough of those votes, and it looks like how you vote is consistent with the final result. If you vote a lot and your votes end up being consistent with whatever the final result is, you get a right to start, you're allowed to start writing notes. So like there's layers to how you can participate, right? If you're just being a jackass and you're just like being Mr. Contrarian or Mrs. Contrarian, do the opposite of what everybody wants, you're not going to get the rights, because what this is trying to do is being a neutral fact-checking device and trying to remove political bias or find the central resolution. And I found it.
I was going to say, is there parallels to how Wikipedia works in it or not?
Wikipedia has much less emphasis on finding quote unquote the middle ground. It's more concentrated now, and kind of like there's a lot of seniority in Wikipedia now.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've been there for a long time, you have a certain ranking and reputation. I know that some people think Wikipedia editors are more quote unquote left leaning. I don't. I haven't seen. I don't know what the research is on that, but there are a lot of Wikipedia flame wars, to be sure. I mean, we're talking about 6,000 people or under 10,000 people like managing the greatest resource of like information ever.
That's crazy.
So difficult, right? Community notes is interesting because, and this is what Vitalik wrote. This is why it's relevant to what we just talked about. He goes, what interests me most about community notes is how, despite not being a quote unquote crypto project, it might be the closest to instantiation of crypto values that we have seen in the mainstream world. Community notes are not written or curated by some centrally selected set of experts. I guess that's probably more Wikipedia, because there is that group of under 10,000, right? And then Vitalik continues, rather, community notes can be written and voted on by anyone. And which notes are shown or not shown is decided entirely by an open source algorithm. So that's interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, the X Twitter site has a detailed and extensive guide describing how the algo works, and you can download the data containing which notes and votes have been published. Run the algo locally and verify yourself. So there is this transparent, decentralized aspect. I guess that's what he means by the crypto values. He says community notes is not perfect, but it's surprisingly close to satisfying the idea of credible neutrality, all while being impressively useful even under contentious conditions. So let me ask you guys, what do you guys think about community notes? Bilal first.
I think it's pretty good. I mean, I haven't used this. I've never written anything for it, but just seeing it pop up when someone writes something, like we joke about on the show all the time, but most of us are never really doing that Google search to actually verify what we're reading. So even if you did, how do you even know what to search for? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So I think it's always helpful to see, but I haven't really thought about it deeply enough to think, is the fact checking accurate as well? My assumption is it is, but I haven't really dug into it enough.
And in a lot of the like real, when people are fact checking a particular story, they'll provide sources too, right? They'll like multiple sources will be attached underneath. Yeah. But is it basically always the highest voted note on a single tweet? Do you know the mechanics of it? They're not collaboratively written, right? It's like one person's note arrives at the top.
You know that this is where it gets interesting. This is why Vitalik found that had quote unquote credible neutrality. So obviously, when you hear Elon talking about it, I know a lot of people think that his interactions are coded more right wing now, right? The tension being that a lot of his main projects are obviously liberal projects, left wing, and that's besides the point. Take Elon out of it; it's an open source algo. So this is what Vitalik said. He looked into the notes, and I'm probably going to butcher the mechanics, but basically, to Jack's question, it's not an average of the votes as a number. What it is do people that typically disagree with each other based on voting history, and I guess they code a little bit on maybe their interactions on the website, would people that typically disagree with each other, if they end up agreeing on this note, then that is a very strong signal that this is a credibly neutral note. So that's interesting, right?
That's cool.
You take somebody that's super right-wing or super left-wing based on the previous voting, and then you see them agree on something, that is the strongest signal of that note being something that is neutral. So it's dynamic. It's like they didn't hard code what a left or right-leaning person is. They're allowing their voting histories and their interactions to determine where an individual falls. So I think that's where the credible neutrality comes in. I mean, for our purposes, Bilal, you nailed it. It's just hysterical, right? It's like some of the ones that go viral. So for the people that don't really follow community notes closely, there's a sub industry of people collecting and aggregating the funniest community notes. Like a couple of weeks ago, there was like a 17-year-old kid's like, I became a millionaire at 17. And he had a picture of his Ferrari, and the community note underneath goes, this Ferrari is a rental car. You can see the label here. and like just stuff like that. People getting absolutely bodied. But I mean, like, they've done serious. I found it's really useful on like the most inflammatory things, right? Like people are engagement farming all the time around like this awful Maui thing that happened. Oh, here's one.
There we go. Sorry, this jokes.
So, well, okay. So, Bilal, explain what this is. Bilal pulled up a community
I just
note.
pulled it up. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just pulling it up. But this is extremely damaging. It's child abuse, dinner with a 90-year-old teen mom with 2 toddlers. And then the community note says, feeding your children pepperoni pizza is not abusive. There's just like, there's a lot of kind of semi-funny ones on here.
You know what else is interesting about it is like another engagement amplifier. Like the community note becomes like another layer of context that gets rocketed up again, like to Bilal's, the example you just shared. Like if Elon's goal is like massive amounts of engagement on top of engagement on top of engagement, this is doing a great job of that.
Right, because it's also a version of like you know how we talk about like dunking, quote retweets.
Right. It's like the official dunk.
It's the official dunk. Your take is actually awful based on like these resources.
Provably, credibly neutral, awful. Yeah.
So that's such incredibly neutral. Just engagement like 101, right? Dude, here's a funny thing. Elon's been community noted a ton, right? Like this is what we're talking about. It's like the owner of the website who has a lot of
one right now of that where it says Elon Musk cannot do this. The feature to block someone on the site is required. That was the one. I was
This is a great example. You got pull it up. So Elon, we should mention this briefly. He's thinking about getting rid of the block feature on Twitter, which got a lot of people upset. I actually think if you just make the mute thing really powerful, it's basically the same. But anyways, Bilal, read what.
So Elon Musk says block is going to be deleted as a feature except for DMs, and a reader's added context. Elon Musk cannot do this. The feature to block someone on the site is required as a social media app to be allowed on the App Store and the Google Play Store.
You know what though? That's actually not true. He can do it. Right? That statement is incorrect.
You saying
he can do it. He can't do it without breaking the rules that would make the app distributed. Yeah.
That needs to get a.
That's an extra community note.
Jack's going to be on
Inception
the community notes.
Like the debate. Yeah, I wish that was more of a part of. I don't know where that comes from. I've seen it on TV, I guess, but the debate culture, American movies growing up. Yeah, get on the debate team. My school did not have a debate team.
Wait, what was that film? The Great Debaters? Did you guys ever see that?
Never saw that one. Let me while you're pulling
Good
that
film.
up, let me finish.
That was a Denzel film. Sorry, underrated film. 7.5 IMDb.
Oh my goodness. Rafa, put that flick up, Reco of the Week.
There we go. Sorry, go on. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I'm just going to finish with Vitalik's thoughts. Obviously, he doesn't think it's perfect, so he goes, this is what he concludes with. Algorithmic transparency of the type that Community Notes offers is not quite full-on decentralized social media. You know what it is? Friend.tech.
Here we go.
He goes, if you disagree with how Community Notes works, there's no way to see a view of the same content with a different algo. But it's the closest that very large-scale applications are going to get within the next couple of years. And we can see that provides a lot of value already, both by preventing centralized manipulation and by ensuring that platforms do not engage in such manipulation can get proper credit for doing so.
Here's a question for you, boys.
Interesting.
What do you think about the morality of monetizing community note contributions?
I was just thinking if Jack was doing this, he'll be selling those community notes as NFTs when I made the joke earlier. But no, but what do you mean? Like in what way?
Like as a community note participant, voter, writer, etc. Like if I'm getting paid for generating impressions by doing inflammatory shit, should there not be an incentive? Rewarded. Should there not be an incentive, or does it make sense? What behavior would this produce if you paid people for like the community notes on a tweet that has 10 million impressions? Some of that ad revenue goes to the people who community noted the thing, because now we're having like there's almost this perverse incentive to write something fake,
That is
get
all
community
divisive.
noted, amplify it up.
Yeah,
That's what's
I
happening.
think,
a
I think
lot.
you answered it, man. You cannot monetize community.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point because it actually brings up what's happening right now with as much as we're all fans of people being paid out for their hard work writing a bunch of stuff on the internet. I'm seeing it on. You saw I was accidentally in my Arsenal Twitter account just there. My Twitter feed on Arsenal is literally, you're seeing it change. Like from the people who are making fun of people getting the blue check to now they're more getting blue checks because they need it to get paid out.
Bro, they're doing it. You called it.
Let's see it. Do you have an example?
I'd have to look. But you can see people asking questions that are clearly baiting people to respond. And in football, it's so easy because it's literally you get two teams fighting each other.
Wait, hold on, Bilal.
Fascinating, man. Yeah.
Bilal, so you called this. You said that most people in your soccer Twitter world were not blue checks, but they need to get it.
From my experience, yeah, they need that.
Dude,
to.
This is actually huge for X Twitter because we've talked about it before. Like live sports is like it's one of the biggest moats for X Twitter. Absolutely, real-time commentary on live sports. Everybody's got the second screen now. If people in these communities are realizing they get paid out for their hot takes and engagement, that's because losing that community would have been honestly, arguably the most painful thing that could happen to X Twitter. Now it's not going to happen.
Yeah, no.
Decentralizing the Colosseum, boys.
Yeah, but it is really no. I mean, all jokes aside, though, it is creating this behavior though that I think is generally not very positive in terms of quality content. Like as a user, because you're seeing people
the same memes from Reddit. Yeah. I'm guilty of this stuff. Like the same people there's so much ripping off going on. Like it's always happened, but it's like so egregious.
People are just trying to take. Yeah, that's a big part of it, but also specifically, like you can they're stealing content, which borrowing, whatever you want to call it, depends. Like if you remixed it or not, or just straight posted it with Trunk Fan's thumbnail on it. Stamped on it, but the other one is I saw one of these guys I follow. I can't find it right now, but he wrote something which was so obviously, to piss off another team's fans, and you can see those people in the replies, and then he responds after being like, obviously I did this for engagement, right? And it was, and it's like at least he's kind of saying it straight up. But long term, I guess it comes back to the wider philosophical discussion we've had on the show about. Like the number going up isn't necessarily always a good thing in terms of that's what the product team is optimizing for. It's what Elon Musk probably is optimizing for. So like he says, we've had the most, the seconds on platform are the highest they've ever been. I saw he wrote in the last month or whatever. That might be true, but I think slowly, like long term, if it becomes even more of this sort of behavior where people are just writing fake stuff essentially, to get more impressions, to get more money, it just becomes like the rest of the web then, right? Like the BuzzFeed and all those sort of sites have been doing this forever. It's not like this is only on Twitter. It's just, it's a little bit, it's not all good, obviously. And it's a weird incentive as well. So, anyway, anything else on the community notes, boys, before we wrap it up on the ARM IPO?
Yes, let's get to ARM, buddy.
Jack, any thoughts? You look like you're thinking there.
I had some, but I forgot. Let's do the ARM thing.
All right, let's do ARM IPO. And maybe we'll have time for that one last philosophical question.
Oh, yeah, we're going to do the philosophical one.
Let's do that. ARM IPO. Trung, over to you, mate. I know you got two Brits here, and it's a British company.
Yeah, this is for you guys, man. So for ARM, how much do you guys know about ARM?
I just know it's got something to do with processors, but not like NVIDIA, right? They design them or something?
NVIDIA also designed. So like, I'll just give you guys this is
and they were also public a long time ago, no? This is the second time we've gone public.
So ARM is the biggest and most important tech company in the UK, likely. So Bilal nailed it. It was a public company. So what ARM does is this. They design the architecture for chips that are found in 99% of smartphones. So they get paid speaking about, we're talking about royalty, they get paid a royalty for every iPhone that's sold based on their chip design. Yeah, so they design a chip, the architecture the instructions for using it and like how to actually build it. They don't do any building of it themselves. So this company was founded in Cambridge in the mid 80s by a gentleman. His name, well, now she's a she. Her name is Sophie Wilson. She's known as one of the 10 most important females in tech history. So what's interesting about the ARM historically is that the chip itself was an accident. So they didn't have the tools to build this chip that they wanted. They wanted a low power consumption. So remember that. What do you need in smartphones? You need chips that don't consume a lot of power because it's not a laptop. You're not connected into a wall. You have portable batteries, and a low power consumption chip is super valuable. And they basically stumbled into this because they wanted to design a chip for a really, really small computer, and they didn't have the right tooling. So they basically designed it in the most conservative way possible. And their design, which they had no idea would be this good, ended up being able to like run on no power. So that's like the history behind ARM. To Bilal's point, it was previously public, and the individual that purchased it in 2016 is our old friend Masayoshi-san. So when Masa got the $100 billion vision fund and he had to spend it, his bet was actually on the future of the Internet of Things. You guys remember how crazy the hype was around the Internet of Things?
Oh man, I worked in an agency back when that was going crazy. Oh, fuck. Like,
well, give us,
pitch,
what was the pitch? What was the pitch?
Every pitch is like, how are we going to make this work on a fridge? Yeah, what are we going to do? Like, it was
a fridge is the classic example. Or the toaster, the toaster as well.
Smart home, the bulbs, it was just the most ridiculous shit you can imagine. Like any brand had nothing to do with any of that stuff. Internet of Things, yeah. Crazy.
No, but you nailed it, right? I love that you had this background because that was a point, right? Guys, think it was 6-7 years ago. Everything was like, oh, we're gonna have chips in our shoes. We're gonna have chips in our Costco hats, and again, go back to what we were talking about. ARM. They designed the lowest power consumption chips. So if you're going to have a chip in a microwave or a smart fridge, you're going to want one that doesn't consume a ton of power, right? Because you don't need a general purpose, like a CPU where you can do everything. You just need to like keep the fridge cool, right? So Masa was making this huge bet on it. So he acquired ARM for $32 billion. It was at the time the largest acquisition of a European tech company ever. So ARM is systemically important, even from a national security side in the UK. So anytime like ARM gets flipped, like the UK, basically national security and tech bureaucracy has to be involved. So a couple interesting things have happened. NVIDIA, Bilal, you mentioned it. So they are the largest chip designers for GPUs, for video games initially, but now for AI. They tried to buy ARM 2 years ago, but the regulators came in and said, oh no, you can't do that. This will create a monopoly. Because the thing about ARM is that because they supply so many different customers, especially if we're talking about the smart fridge IoT world, think about all the customers they had, right? Everybody uses ARM's designs. If NVIDIA owned them, it was so clear to regulators that, oh, if NVIDIA owns ARMs, like ARM supplies all these other people, like now NVIDIA might get priority on certain chip designs, and that we are not okay with. So NVIDIA was unable to acquire ARM. Masa really needs that cheddar. Like we've talked about before, that dude is taking L's. Like the Vision Fund and SoftBank lost, I think, $40 billion last year on their investments in stuff like, do you guys know the name of the Uber in China? They call Didi. They took a massive
Didi.
Didi. It took a massive L on Didi, took a massive L on WeWork, took a massive L on all these companies that Masa went crazy on. So now they're going to list it, and this will be the biggest IPO of the year, allegedly, most likely. And as we know, 2022 was not great for stocks. 2023 has been better. And people are wondering, will this open up the quote unquote IPO window? Will people see the demand from the retail market and think that there's more opportunities to go public? I think this is probably a one-off because of the size of this company. I don't think you can really gleam too much. But the TLDR is that ARM basically needs to get into AI now. So they launched an AI design in May. But now they're trying to go public for 60 to 70 bill. So that's where we're at. That's
Nice.
that's a TLDR on ARM.
Love
Very
it.
good.
Good little
Good background?
TLDR there. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
The only thing to mention, maybe you did mention this and I was zoned out, but because I was reading our next topic here.
Yeah,
But
of course.
the fact that it's not going on the UK stock exchange. Did you just mention this?
I didn't mention that. No, but that is a big point of
kind of an
contention.
interesting point, right? Because I was talking about this with someone on the weekend who's a British guy. We were kind of talking about the good old days of the UK and how it feels really like they're really struggling. Like he still lives there, and he actually works in banking. So we were talking about how just the difference between the UK and the US. And I know we've talked about it on the pod a bunch of times. And I'm sure there's lots of great things still going on, but his sentiment was really just like there's a lot of things just that don't make sense there at the moment. And I think especially after Brexit, he's feeling a lot of that kind of soft power has moved away. And it feels like a delayed thing, but it makes a lot of sense for ARM to IPO over here in many ways. But
Yeah,
it's another kind of hit to...
it's a blow.
It's a blow, right?
To
Yeah.
England.
Well,
I don't know if you
so-
guys saw. Go ahead, Jack.
So I don't know how much of a line of questioning this opens up, but what is they re-establish themselves as a business in the States? So like have a proxy entity
It's
in the
still
States?
money. It's still no. You can just they want the more liquid U.S. capital markets, but they're still going to be based in.
So
in
they
Canada.
just it goes public here, people get a chance to buy it. So there's just a bigger market, I guess, Jack. Good question though.
And it's going on where?
NASDAQ.
NASDAQ, yeah.
So NASDAQ is a private company, correct?
Yeah, NASDAQ is. But
We should do an episode on this, Trung, where you
Breaking it
explain this shit.
the
True.
exchanges. They're
the exchange
fascinating.
business and how they make their
money.
fees and oh my god,
It's
insane.
really
Actually, I'll tease something for listeners. Actually, the exchange businesses have turned into one of the biggest influential parts of the market. Like they wield so much power that people don't even understand.
Yeah, the
like
app
the
stores of the
business.
financial
Yeah.
market.
The app store.
They
literally- No, like you used to investment banks used to hold this privileged position in like the finance world, but then 2008 happened, all this regulation. Like exchanges have sneakily become like the kingmakers.
Mm-hmm.
But we could talk about that.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
100%. That's a great episode. We'll do that next week.
And
I have
just
some resources.
vampire all of this stuff. Like develop great technology anywhere in the world and then just have
They'll
the
suck it all in.
magnetic
Exactly.
network effect. It's crazy. Yeah.
Love it.
Dude, so
I've
Bilal, do
added
you have a
that.
question?
I saved that for next week so we can break it down.
did you have a question about ARM?
No. I was going to move on to the last question, but go on. You finish what you're going to say.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating. Jack brought up a great point about the UK, and Bilal, you mentioned the good old days because if you look at the FTSE, the FTSE, which is the main stock exchange in England, I guess London. I mean, it's like not great companies, right? It's like consumers. I think the biggest companies on the FTSE or the biggest market caps as a percentage are like mining, oil, because London is still very central for those industries. And then you might have consumer goods. You know what? Let's pull it up quickly, man.
Looking at
do
it.
you
I
guys
was just
actually
looking
know-
that up. Yeah.
Let's see top holdings.
Companies in here.
Banks. You probably have a lot of Shell. Okay, so here are the
Shell,
top
yeah.
companies: Shell, AstraZeneca, Pharma, HSBC, Bank, British American Tobacco, Consumer, Diageo, Consumer, Unilever.
Tobacco, that's filth, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Phil.
Crazy.
BP. Yeah, Rio Tinto. Yeah, it's banks, mining, and oil, and like tobacco. So, to Bilal's
Old
point,
school industries.
Yeah, we
like they've
need-
been there
Yeah.
for hundreds of years. Yeah.
Unreal.
dude, not getting ARM is a bit of an L, man. But anyways, that was
makes
a little
sense, though.
TLDR.
If I was
Yeah.
them, I'd probably do the same. to be
Why
honest.
not do that exactly?
I don't know, understand enough about it. What the upside would be of doing it in the UK, but probably apart from like pride of
Patriotism,
from there,
yeah.
Well, how easy is it to get
You can do a
exposure
list.
to? No, I'm saying like how the typical pension plan in the UK, let's say. I don't expect anyone to have an answer for this, but it's like, does that have majority of its exposure to American equities or a good amount?
I think it's both.
There's a lot
I've got like an old UK pension account, and I used to have, but you could basically get access to most of the global stuff nowadays, especially if you open like a Vanguard, like even Vanguard's in the UK now. When I was there, I don't know if they did or it wasn't as popular. But
is Jack referring specifically to the corporate and endowments? I think
I'm just referring to. I just think all of this shit is so fucking silly, man. It's like, get this on Ethereum ASAP.
On ETH, get paid at 30% or paid at 12%.
Get it on base.
Yeah,
get it on base. Yeah, exactly. This is the opposite of Ethereum.
It is fascinating how these like brand names essentially are the distributors of these things. It's just, I would love to do an episode on that, Tron.
I'm excited. I'm gonna come deep next week.
Get schooled.
That might be a SAP post breakdown as well.
Yeah, but I'll send you questions to ping me so we can have a nice.
All right, perfect. All right, let's do last one. Talking of questions, last question here for us boys. Jack, I think you shared this in the group chat. Incredible chat here. So man,
this is like, somebody should steal this for like the closing question of their podcast. You know, people do that, like, do you believe in aliens or whatever?
Yeah. Like the pop question that you always ask that one. Yeah. So Tyler Alterman said, when did you first discover the malleability of social reality? For me, it was when I did my Eagle Scout project, building a boardwalk. I was advised to call out lumberyards and ask for wood for free. I did, and the lumberyards were just like, okay. In a second tweet, I also called up a cinder block place to donate cinder blocks, and they were also like, okay. Altogether, these places donated thousands of dollars of free stuff to me, a 17-year-old. And so I guess the question was, when did you, has there been a moment where you realized that as well?
Let's talk about, what do you think he means malleability of social reality? Because his two examples are basically asking for something, and then you just, his examples to me just suggest, don't let that blocker in your head where you.
This is how the world works.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this is how the world works. It's like, I'm just going to say, no, I'm not going to try. Like, is it that? Or is it just like when you realize, oh, like, okay, my perception of the world was wrong, right? I'll answer that second one. I think that is, so I'll tell you the one where I realized, you guys will laugh. When I realized that like there's systems in place and like none of it really made sense. Do you guys ever have Columbia House where you pick CDs and they send you like 5? It was like an early subscription thing, right? So you pick 3 CDs, they'll send it to you.
That was like Netflix old school for DVDs, I guess.
So it's like free, and then like you have to commit, but then the next month or the next 6 months, the next 10 you got to pay, right? And that's how they make their money. You guys never had that? I'm sure some.
No, but they had something similar. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So here's what I did. The person that lived next to us many years ago when I was growing up, it was an abandoned house, or they didn't live there anymore. It was a vacant house. And so the key with this Columbia House thing was you send CDs to a house, right? That's how you hook them. These free CDs. I just started sending free CDs to my neighbor's house. And I just go, I know nobody's there. I just walk over one day and grab, lots of free CDs. So like more free CDs for me. So that's when I realized, I'm like, like the systems in place here, like they kind of make no sense. And like nobody's really watching anything. And I'll tell you what's funny about that is I should give Rafa the clip, but Curb Your Enthusiasm made fun of that exact same thing. So Leon, the Larry's friend in Curb, was pretending to like rip Larry for like being a sketchy individual. And one of the things he said was like, you're the type of person that would like send CDs to like your neighbor's house, and then like you go over and grab them and pretend like they're yours. So anyways, that was like that's probably 8 or 9. And I was like, the world is like kind of just,
you can find ways around
autopilot. It's just an autopilot. So I don't know if it's the same, but I'll send it off to you guys.
I like that, going to the neighbors. I feel, Jack, have you ever? I've definitely done that as well, sending stuff to neighbors.
So
I did. I have a good SIM cards, but I'll tell you mine after. Go on, Jack. Go on.
I have a good delivery story I can't say on the podcast. So
can't say on the podcast.
We'll do it next time we meet up.
All right, got it.
The malleability thing. The starkest example for me was when I first was living in New York. I started working for my first agency job, and this guy that I was working for was pitching a Ralph Lauren, what's like a campaign for Ralph Lauren, and it did a casting call for models for this campaign we're going to shoot, right? And he's just like, oh yeah, just call up a talent agency and say, we're casting for Ralph Lauren. Here's the address. Come here on Saturday. Go there on Saturday. Like 40 models show up to this room in West Chelsea, and he's like, check them in and do like photos and all that stuff. And I'm just like sitting there like, how did you get people to show up to this thing? He's like, oh, that's how it works. You know, like this idea of transferred credibility through I'm doing, like, the contract didn't exist, right? There's like a implication that there's an opportunity, people show up for it. Blew my mind.
Well, how old were you?
21.
I like that. That's a great example. The name, this guy's just you know what it's like? It's like when startups like put the logos of companies they work with, even if they haven't worked with them, or if they deliver like the small, like, or
even if
like,
they haven't worked
they
with
use Gmail. They use Gmail. They put Google on the thing.
a partnered with. That's funny.
Bro, I'm stealing that for Billy AI shit.
That's so good.
I'm gonna be like partnered with Gmail. Oh my goodness.
Partner with Google. Partner with Alphabet. Make it even sound more B2B official.
You know, another great example of this is Outsiders. Portnoy putting fake ads in the first magazine he made. It's like you didn't get paid by the advertisers, but just plugging businesses for free. You have that transferred credibility. Like some of this stuff is, you know, dubious, right?
Like Columbia House neighbor stuff, a little bit gray area.
Yeah.
But
I'm saying like there is this, and I'm like hesitant to use this stuff as well. Like I worked with probably one of the biggest, most recognized brands in the world in my advertising career, and as an agency owner. And I always be so hesitant to be like, oh, I'm not going to go in with that. I'm just going to lead with the work and blah, blah, blah. It's like, as soon as you start just dropping that name, everyone's like, where do I sign? You know, it's like, that is as much as if you love it, hate it, whatever your reaction is to it, that is how people's brains work. And
it's a shortcutting of the brain. Like it's needed.
It carries so much equity. And obviously there is no recommendation to use that to mislead people, but like lean into it if you do have that credibility, and it just completely like massively accelerates your access to opportunity.
100%. I don't know if my answer is exactly, because the question was a little bit of a funnily worded question, but I'll just quickly say on the sending stuff to neighbors, 100% did. That was one of the first things on the internet where I made money, was selling SIM cards on eBay. I don't know if we ever talked about that, but I would sell it at school. These O2 Genie SIM cards. I don't, Jack, did we?
Of
do we ever talk
course,
about
man. Of course,
so
I remember
O2
that.
Genie, for the old school UK people.
What was on that again?
It was
300
300 free texts. You top up £10 a month, you get £30 worth of text, because it was 10p a text at that time. So the pitch was easy. You'd be like, oh, you basically, you're going to make £30 worth of text by buying a £10 SIM card, right? So I would sell them at school and just get them. People pay £5-10, whatever. That was great. But then I found a way where you could go on o2.co.uk and request 6 free SIM cards as a student, right? So and I was a student, so I got 6 of those. Requested it, sent it to home, and then I found a way. I was like, all right, let me send them next door. I got another 6, then sent it to my grandma's house.
Bling king, baby.
Yeah, but then what I realized was there was actually, this is before people really were selling ebooks or information products, if you want to call it that, 2003 or 4. And what I did was, I was like, I wonder if, like, I was like, why am I just selling the SIM cards and sending it in the post? Like, I can just tell people how to do it. If they're willing to pay for that information, I'll clearly say I have a way of doing it. So I basically created a listing. And again, look, I was like 15 or 16. So I don't want this to come up as like a negative way, but I made a listing on eBay of like a sale of information, how to get 6 SIM cards worth X amount. And that's how they were worth £10 each. And the saving overall was 30. And I put in there like
consulting fee.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, so basically they would pay. It was an auction, so it would start at 99p, and people would pay. Sometimes people paid like £20. It would just keep going. And I had 100% feedback score. Everyone got, I had like an email that I would copy and paste, send it over to them, say, let me know if you have any issues. And so that was the first time I
Incredible.
was
You
like,
realize
oh, wait
you
a
could
minute.
bend the world to your will.
Yeah.
That you could, in the words of Steve Jobs, you can make a dent in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish it was that level. But yeah, it was, I don't even know if that answered the question, but it was just based on your example. And then I'll just mention one last one was I've always looked out for this where people say, well, I wrote it down here. Why wouldn't they just do it themselves? And so even this week, literally this weekend, I'm talking to people about what I do on the agency side. And they're like, oh, why don't they just hire people internally for that or blah, blah, blah. And it's people just don't understand always how it works because it is kind of a black box to a lot of people. But the time I remember doing it is even just like selling CDs at school. People could download music and burn on CD. But there were two parts to that. One, knowing which music to pick, being a curator of taste. And two was just the effort of like buying the CD, buying a CDR writer and doing it. So people were willing to spend £5 on that and they would get a banging Bilal's mixtape back in the day, you know? So that was one. But the one when I started Street Vibes, the e-commerce store.
When I started Street Vibes.
Yeah, Street Vibes.
Incredible.
This one was interesting because I would be calling up factories, right? So like China. And so I'd be asking like, oh, I have a tiny little store. I want to buy like, let's say tracksuit or hats or whatever. And they would always say, oh, you have to have like a minimum of 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces, whatever. And I obviously didn't have money for that. So eventually I started just going to my local, there's a place, Walthamstow Market is the longest street market in Europe. And there's these actual stores that sell clothes and stuff as well. So I just started going and talking to those guys and trying to understand how they get their supplies. And I was like, look, I'm selling this on the internet. I don't have the money to buy the wholesale stuff, but could I take pictures of your stuff? I'll put it online. If it sells, I'll come here. Can we agree a price? So it was kind of getting a wholesale price or slightly above wholesale price, but with no capital, commitment.
Hey.
So that was the first time I was like, oh, I can actually just go and ask someone. And if they say no, they said no.
That's an answer. That's a direct answer to the guy's question.
Yeah.
Hey, Bilal, what was the URL of Street Vibes? Do you remember?
Streetvibes.com, but it was a street dash vibes, I think. And it was with a Z, but I also owned the S, Street Vibes with S. But you can see the archive. Yeah. It's a terrible website, but it was built on OS Commerce, open source commerce. Was a big fan of the open web at the time. But yeah, if people look that up, it's a little embarrassing because it looks really, really bad. But
mate, it's in 2008. You gotta wear that with pride.
2004 originally. That might be the first. It was .co.uk.
I'm on the 2008 snapshot right now.
Yeah, that's not that bad. Yeah, right. Anyway, so end of episode. But yeah, that was a fun one as well. But I think that was the question. That was a really good question about like. Even this weekend, my friend is like, oh, don't they need you to do X? And I was like, yeah, but they need to know you're doing the work that you've promised or the result that you've promised. And your assumption is as an employee, you have to be in a chair all day and send a report at the end of the week. My assumption is I ask them clearly what they need and I will provide that to them. And it's irregardless of how I did it. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's the question I tried to find.
That's a great answer, dude. That ended up being a great example of Bilal bending the world to his will.
There we go. All right, boys. Good chat this week. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And we'll see you guys again next week. Cheers.
Yeah, that was great, guys.